Hello et bienvenue à tous dans ce 55e numéro du Rétro. Comme d'habitude, commençons en remerciant tous ceux qui soutiennent la chaîne et qui me permettent de continuer la grande aventure des NBA Stories. La chaîne propose un travail de recherche et d'interview de plus en plus important. Si vous appréciez notre projet et que vous souhaitez apporter votre pierre à l'édifice, sachez que vous pouvez désormais offrir un tip directement depuis YouTube en cliquant sur le cœur sous cette vidéo. Même le plus minime soutien est grandement apprécié. La réalisation de cet épisode a été rendue possible grâce au tout nouveau partenaire des NBA Stories, Hooper. Équipementier de référence en France, Hooper s'est allié aux NBA Stories pour concevoir une gamme originale. De qualité, ces maillots ont été conçus en s'inspirant de plusieurs modèles du passé. Vous trouverez donc le noir et blanc Brooklyn, qui rappelle les couleurs actuelles des Nets avec l'air Julius Erving, puis notre favori, le Philly, encore un savant mélange de passé et de présent. Chaque maillot comporte une citation propre, mettant à l'honneur ces deux villes mythiques du basketball. Pour vous procurer ces modèles vintage, il vous suffit de vous rendre sur le site hooperstore.fr. Et pour célébrer le lancement de la collection, Hooper vous offre 10% de réduction en utilisant le code promo LNS10. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal. Depuis plusieurs années maintenant, les NBA Stories vous font voyager à travers les carrières des plus grandes légendes du basketball. Pourtant, certaines d'entre elles manquent encore à l'appel, et notamment le gigantesque Bill Russell. Cette anomalie est tout simplement due au fait que les images d'archives sont assez rares dans la NBA des années 50 et 60, ce qui rend le travail de recherche fastidieux. Mais enfin, en bon passionné de balle orange, il était hors de question de ne pas vous exposer la carrière de Bill Russell suite à son récent décès. Nous avons la chance aujourd'hui de compter sur la participation de Mike Daynon, le monsieur Celtics des NBA Stories. Daynon est un fan célèbre de l'équipe qu'il supporte depuis les années 60. Ça en fait des titres célébrés. Nous vous présentons également notre deuxième intervenant qui comptera une grande partie de notre portrait du jour, Lee Mandeville. Ce dernier est l'un des journalistes sportifs bostoniens les plus respectés, lui qui a longtemps écrit pour le prestigieux Sports Illustrated. Sa carrière de journaliste lui a maintes fois permis de rencontrer Bill Russell. Mandeville est l'auteur de plusieurs livres classés best-sellers par le New York Times, et notamment le récent Tallman Short Shorts. Dans cet ouvrage passionnant, l'auteur nous plonge au cœur des épiques finales 1969, qui vit les Celtics de Bill Russell affronter les Lakers de Will Chamberlain. Si nous devions utiliser un adjectif pour décrire la vidéo du jour, ce serait assurément légendaire. États-Unis, 1942. Le pays venait de s'engager dans la Seconde Guerre mondiale, les temps étaient troubles et l'avenir toujours plus incertain. L'avenir, le présent comme le passé, n'avait de toute façon jamais été un motif de réjouissance pour les 14 millions d'Afro-Américains, une minorité qui constituait alors 8% de la population américaine. Si la fin de la guerre de sécession, et donc de l'esclavage, avait donné espoir à cette communauté, ce ne fut que de courte durée. Une fois l'esclavage aboli, vint l'apparition des lois dites Jim Crow au sud des États-Unis, foyer de la grande majorité des Afro-Américains. Puisque l'égalité était en théorie garantie pour tous, les anciens États esclavagistes mirent en place la notion du tous égaux, mais séparés. Dans les faits, les Afro-Américains n'étaient assurément pas égaux de leurs semblables blancs, mais certainement séparés. Des écoles, aux hôpitaux, jusqu'aux cimetières, tout était fait pour que les Noirs restent des citoyens de seconde zone, victimes permanentes d'injustice, de brimades, sinon de lynchage. Alors que le sud rural avait depuis toujours été le cœur de la communauté noire américaine, l'essor industriel du pays conduit à un phénomène de migration vers d'autres régions plus éloignées. Perspective de plus d'emplois, de plus d'égalité, peut-être même certains se mirent à rêver à plus de bonheur. C'est donc par millions que des Afro-Américains émigrèrent vers les usines du Midwest, et certains même sous le soleil californien. Parmi eux, un dénommé Bill Russell.
What my mother told me, the white people in Monroe, Louisiana were really quite mean. And so she did everything she could to keep me protected so that they didn't get a chance to do anything to me or have any negative impact on me.
Nous sommes donc en 1942 et le jeune Bill Russell avait 8 ans lorsque sa famille quitta la Louisiane rurale pour Oakland. Cette banlieue de San Francisco comptait alors une communauté noire croissante qui vivait dans une précarité certaine. Le racisme était certes moins présent en Californie, mais cela ne fut pas synonyme d'enfance plus heureuse pour le jeune Russell. Sa mère et confidente décéda lorsqu'il avait 12 ans, laissant sa charge à son seul père.
I don't know, why'd you leave me here with these people? You know, because other than my father, there was people just were not generally overwhelmingly kind to you.
Noir, pauvre, désormais semi-orphelin, toutes les cases étaient cochées pour l'enfance dure et éprouvante que connut Russell. Un coup de pouce divin était nécessaire pour échapper à la misère, et celui-ci apparut sur un cours de basketball.
I'd never seen a basketball until I went to California. And then I started playing basketball, and I could not understand how I was 9 and the kid 6 could play better.
Et oui, si vous croyez que Bill Russell écrivit son conte de fées en se transformant en un prodige de la balle orange, vous vous trompez. Maladroit à cet exercice, malgré sa grande taille, il ne fut même pas retenu dans l'équipe de son école. Et pourtant, après des années de pratique et ses presque 2,10 m aidant, Russell obtint dans l'anonymat une bourse pour rejoindre la toute proche université de San Francisco. Une nouvelle fois, le jeune pivot dut faire face au plus grand obstacle de sa vie, le racisme. Lorsque son équipe devait voyager dans les États ségrégés du sud des États-Unis, Russell eut une piqûre de rappel que malgré son physique imposant, il n'était jamais le bienvenu.
I left the hotel and I went to a restaurant down the street, and the proprietor asked me what I wanted. I said, "This is a restaurant, isn't it? I'd like to get something to eat." He told me no, so I walked out.
En ce milieu des années 50, être un athlète talentueux n'était pas un passe-droit pour échapper au racisme. Quelques années plus tôt, le joueur de baseball Jackie Robinson avait déjà échauffé des plus conservateurs en devenant le premier noir à rejoindre la Ligue majeure. De toute façon, devenir professionnel était inimaginable pour un Bill Russell encore en manque cruel de fondamentaux. Pourtant, le recruteur de l'université de San Francisco, Al DeJulio, fut le premier à déceler un talent en lui. Il raconta: « Bill ne savait pas bien manier la balle, mais j'ai vu en lui un incroyable timing, une vitesse folle et surtout une intelligence épatante. Je l'ai convaincu de tenter sa chance à l'université. » C'est lors de son arrivée à San Francisco que Russell comprit que le sport était certainement la seule façon pour lui d'échapper à la misère qu'il avait tant poursuivie. Comprenons qu'à cette époque, le basketball était joué de façon approximative et la défense quasiment inexistante. C'est pourtant dans ce domaine que Bill Russell connut une véritable révélation. Au lieu d'être un simple plot immobile, il se démarqua en utilisant sa vitesse et son intelligence pour fermer l'accès à la raquette.
He invented the block shot.
Taft recovers and he can move. Russell blocks his shot, and the Dons are showing their power.
When he was in college, he was a junior. He started playing as a junior every day. And one of the first games was against the University of California, Berkeley. And they had a guy who was supposed to be the All-America candidate as a center. And the guy came down and Bill Russell blocked his shot, jumped up in the air and blocked his shot. The guy came down again, Bill Russell blocked his shot. Third time, he blocked his shot again. And the coach of the University of San Francisco called timeout and said, you're not playing defense right. You're not supposed to leave your feet. You're supposed to stay on your feet so you can't get faked out. You can't, wind up in the air. And Bill Russell said, but I stopped 3 baskets in a row. And the guy said, no, I want you to play the way. So Bill Russell went out and he played that way. And the All-American guy scored 3 baskets in a row. And Bill Russell said, well, the hell with this. I'm just going to play the way I do. And so he was the first player, really, to just come out and block everybody's shot. He invented the block shot.
Dans le microsome du basketball universitaire d'alors, Russell fit connaître son nom chaque jour davantage. Et comme cela arrivait souvent à cette époque, la NCAA alla jusqu'à changer ses règles pour limiter la domination du pivot. 3 saisons et 2 titres plus tard, Russell et son gigantesque rival Will Chamberlain étaient considérés comme les plus grandes sensations du basketball universitaire. Bien joué, c'est bien, mais pouvoir enfin remplir son compte en banque, c'est mieux. Après avoir hésité à rejoindre les Harlem Globetrotters, Russell décida finalement d'inscrire son nom à la draft 1956 d'une ligue alors méconnue, la NBA. Le pivot sembla se diriger vers les Rochester Royals, qui possédaient le premier choix de la draft. Mais cela tomba à l'eau lorsque l'équipe refusa de payer les $25 000 exigés par Russell. C'est alors que l'astucieux Red Auerbach coach des Boston Celtics, entra en action. Il proposa son pivot All-Star Ed Macauley aux Hawks de Saint-Louis, en échange de la sélection de Russell. Et comme cela ne fut pas tout à fait suffisant, il ajouta une place pour un spectacle de patinage qui ravit le propriétaire des Hawks. C'était donc fait. Une fois une médaille d'or olympique acquise en 1956, Russell atterrit à Boston pour faire sa grande entrée en NBA. Gardons en tête qu'en ce milieu des années 50, la ligue était encore balbutiante et à des années-lumière des standards d'aujourd'hui.
You know, they traveled commercial, and only a couple of the players would be first class. The rest would be kind of stuffed in the small seats in the back. The Celtics at that time had 4 people working in their front office. Red Auerbach, who was the general manager, his secretary, a guy who kind of went out and got coffee, and a PR guy. And those were the 4 people. If you wanted to get a season ticket to the Celtics, you called up, and there was a 1 in 4 chance that Red Auerbach would answer the phone. And if you came in, Red himself would take you up and show you what seats you could get and how much they would cost and all of that, and try and talk you into it. So it was very small. The NBA at that time had only 6 employees in New York.
It was extremely different. It was wide open. There was a lot less structure back then. Teams were up and down the court. The pace was much faster than today. And whereas today you're structured to either get into the paint or swing the ball around, get a corner 3. Back then it was like the Wild West. You just run up the court. Whoever had the first open shot would take it.
You know, he said they were all plumbers and firemen, and they worked in the off season. And there were a lot less players in the NBA. You know, and because it was only, I don't know how many, like 12 teams at that time. So there were a lot less players, and they were all older. You know, everybody had graduated college by the time you got to the NBA. So they'd all been coached up in college. And when you came to the NBA, you pretty much had to be a finished product. You weren't one of these 19-year-old guys that they draft and say, well, maybe he's going to grow and maybe he'll add a jump shot and maybe he'll do this or do that. You had to be pretty much developed into what you were. It was a wholly different thing at the time. And you know, when he came into the league, most guys were working in the off season. They would have jobs. They would do different things. Tommy Heinsohn sold insurance. Bob Cousy drove a truck.
Bill Russell, the backbone of the world champion Boston Celtics, winner for the 2nd straight season of the Most Valuable Player Award, a clutch performer if ever one lived. He's the brightest star in the NBA.
Red Auerbach avait assurément vu juste en misant sur Bill Russell. Tout comme à l'université, le pivot métamorphosa dès son arrivée à la NBA.
He did change the game significantly because he had the athletic ability, he had the shot blocking ability. Nobody really before him was a shot blocker like Bill Russell, and so they had to deal with that. The other teams, the opponents, had to deal with that, and Russell was everywhere. He was on defense. He could block shots. He was a great help defender because he blocked a lot of shots, not just on his own man that he was guarding, but on as a help defender. When other players would get beat, Russell was there to protect the rim.
I can rebound, I can run, I can play defense. He made everybody around him better. It was the ultimate piece of the puzzle.
And they would always start the season fast, and they'd have a record like 15-2 or something to start the season because nobody was ready for it the same way the Celtics were.
One thing that you want to do to your opponents is to make them think, make them know they can't win. I tried to put the pressure on them before the game started. They know that they're going to lose, and just how they were going to lose was the only question for them. That's what I wanted them to think when they came to the game. We shut a guy down, or we block a guy's shot and say, yes, we did that to you. And if you come back, we'll do it again.
Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, John Havlicek, Sam Jones. Voilà certains noms que vous avez déjà sûrement entendus et qui constituaient l'une des équipes les plus légendaires de l'histoire. De 1957 à 1968, les Celtics de Bill Russell gagnèrent ni plus ni moins que 10 bagues. Mais jusqu'à aujourd'hui, certains minimisent pourtant ces succès en raison de la supériorité des Celtics face à une supposée faible adversité. Qu'en pensent nos experts?
He was the reason. I mean, he was the reason. He was such a cerebral guy and such a team guy. You know, I mean, they always say, well, he played with all these Hall of Fame players. Well, he put them in the Hall of Fame, I think.
The only difference was the Celtics had Bill Russell, and he just would not be beat. If it was the plumbers and firemen type of thing, you know, that people like to say today to dismiss the years that Bill Russell won 11 championships, if it was like that, then the Celtics would have breezed every year. But it wasn't like that. They had to play their best in the playoffs to get by. How many times did they go to 7 games? Russell himself was 10-0 in 7 game 7s, and so 10 times. They weren't waltzing through to the finals and just kicking everybody's butt with ease. They certainly had their challenges, but they were able to meet every single one of them, and that's what makes Russell unique.
De 1957 à 1968, Bill Russell changea le basketball de par son sens de la défense et surtout son incroyable régularité. 10 titres et un autre à venir, 12 sélections All-Star Game, 5 titres de MVP et d'autres trophées à ne plus quoi savoir en faire. Bill Russell était devenu synonyme de victoire. Mais le joueur ne voulait pas se contenter de simples succès sur les parquets. Dans la suite de Mohamed Ali, il consentit de tous les sacrifices pour s'engager dans le mouvement des droits civiques. Pour Russell, hors de question d'être un homme sandwich, prêt à tout pour satisfaire le public. Puisque le monde ne lui avait rien donné, il ne devait rien au monde en retour. Cette attitude contribua à son image de mauvaise humeur notoire avec les fans et les journalistes. Contrairement à Ali, toujours prompt à faire le spectacle, Russell était bien plus réservé et sans doute atteint par les souvenirs de sa jeunesse. Il se mit notamment à dos les fans de Boston en déclarant « Tu dois au public la même chose qu'il te doit, rien. Je me refuse à toujours sourire et être gentil avec les gosses. » La Nouvelle-Angleterre avait beau être une région plutôt riche et éduquée, loin du sud profond, elle connaissait également un triste passif lié au racisme. Malgré les bagues gagnées par Russell, ce dernier entretint toujours une liaison compliquée avec la ville de Boston, allant jusqu'à des actes de violence contre sa personne.
Some young people who I don't think have ever been arrested broke into his home while he was away, and they defecated on his bed, and they wrote stuff on the walls, and terrible stuff right there. Red Auerbach would always preach the idea of the bad apple, that if somebody treated you wrong or said something wrong, they were the bad apple, that most people were good, that the good apples were all around, and Bill Russell didn't go along with that theory so much. I mean, they won championships and he'd be carried off the court. He kind of derided Boston and said, I don't play for Boston at all. I play for my teammates, and I play for myself, and I play for my team. But Boston, and that kind of set up a conflict right there.
Because he wouldn't sign an autograph, and he was aloof, and he was sort of introverted, people got the idea that he was totally arrogant and he wasn't smart. You see, he was just a big dumb guy, a big dumb athlete, and he was just the opposite.
I was 25, and like I said, I hadn't been anywhere and seen anything, and he was 35 and he'd been everywhere and he'd done everything. He'd already won 10 NBA titles, and so when I was my job would be to see him every day because he was the coach, and I would have to come in and ask him if there were changes in the lineup, if this and that, if this guy was hurt, and different things, and he was very perfunctory in his answers to me. I mean, there was very much a situation that he was the famous guy, and I was the young kid with red hair and freckles. when you'd go see these guys after practice, then there would only be one or two other reporters there. You know, I mean, there were times where it'd be just Bill Russell and me sitting and talking. And I would ask him some question, you know, like every fifth or sixth time, it might catch his imagination. And he would talk, and we'd have a good talk for about 20 minutes or so. And he would talk about his youth and all of that. And I would say, this is great. Bill and I, we're real close now. We're like this. And then the next day I'd say, hello, Bill. And he would just walk right by me. You know, he was that kind of way. And he was that way with Wilt Chamberlain. You know, he was friendly with Wilt Chamberlain, but before games, sometimes he wouldn't say hello. And he would always, he would have the upper hand in most situations, I think.
Nous sommes en 1969. Bill Russell est alors entraîneur-joueur aux Celtics. Cela fit de lui le premier coach noir de l'histoire de la NBA.
Well, I said to myself, who could better motivate Bill Russell than Bill Russell?
First league goes close to the major league sport. Can you do the job impartially without any racial prejudice in reverse?
Yes.
How?
Because the most important factor is respect. And basketball respects the man for his ability, period.
With guys like Jerry West and Elgin Baylor, I feel very, very happy that I am being traded to a team that I believe may stand a chance to go down the record as one of the best teams in basketball ever.
En 1969, l'équipe du coach Bill Russell parvint à retrouver les finales NBA. Face à qui? Son plus grand rival, Wilt Chamberlain.
He just altered the whole game, and when it got down to himself and Wilt, who was his, you know, that's probably the most fabled rivalry in American sport outside of maybe Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. He just dominated Wilt when it counted. Russell was cerebral and figured out, I don't know, the geometry of the game and what he could do to help his teammates, how he could make the good pass, you know, how he could get everything working together. Chamberlain was the physical, you know, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a player who's come along. Maybe Giannis now is the closest thing to Wilt Chamberlain, but you never hear anybody say, well, here's the next Wilt Chamberlain or the new Wilt Chamberlain. He was just a total physical force, but he kind of had a 10-cent head. Feuded with his coaches. He didn't like to practice. He didn't do a lot of stuff that would make a team work. And Russell did all that stuff, which in the end brought all those championships.
Depuis leur jeunesse à l'université, les deux pivots étaient au-dessus du lot. De par leur taille interminable tout d'abord, mais surtout par leur performance sur les parquets. Ouvrez un livre de records, et nul doute que vous y verrez le nom de Wilt Chamberlain. Empiler les points et les rebonds comme personne, pas de souci pour Wilt. Mais gagner autant que les Boston Celtics, impossible. Chamberlain, là des insuccès collectifs, s'en était allé créer une super team aux Los Angeles Lakers. Certains disaient que les deux pivots étaient âgés, et que cet affrontement n'allait pas donner d'étincelles. S'ils savaient.
The Lakers had added Wilt Chamberlain. He was really the first. It was really a free agent deal. It was a trade, but Wilt had kind of said he didn't want to be in Philadelphia, and he had gone to the Lakers to form this absolute super team with Jerry West and Elgin Baylor, who were both huge all-stars. And they were favored to win the whole thing. Russell was seen as old, and the Celtics had finished fourth during the regular season in the East. They were the last playoff qualifier. They had to beat Philadelphia, and then they had to beat the Knicks, you know, kind of evolving into a great team with Walt Frazier and all of that, and Willis Reed. And so then they get to play the Lakers in the final, and everybody favored the Lakers. Everybody thought the Lakers would win, even though the Celtics had won so many titles. And they went out to Los Angeles. They lost the first two games, very close. And Jerry West scored over 50 points in the first game. And so then they came back to Boston, and they won the third game. And the fourth game, which was where the whole series hinged, they won it on a crazy shot at the end on a play that John Havlicek and Larry Siegfried, you know, two guys on the team, kind of had designed for Sam Jones to take a shot at the end, and he took it after his long foot, and the ball hit the back of the basket, went high in the air and came down through the hoop, and they won by a point at the end. So that sent them back 2-2, tied in the series, and the Lakers won Game 5. The Celtics came back and won Game 6.
Help but wonder, how do you feel about going into another seventh game, this time on somebody else's floor?
We've done it before.
And I got to Game 7, which was a famous game where the Lakers were so sure they were going to win that the owner, Jack Kent Cooke, had put all these balloons up on the ceiling, and they were going to be released at the end of the game. And he had the Southern Cal marching band was going to come in playing Happy Days Are Here Again. And he had scheduled interviews and stuff. And so this was all written out in a press release, and the Celtics got a hold of it. And they said, well, maybe this isn't going to happen. And they won the game, a controversial finish with Wilt Chamberlain taking himself out of the game for a while with a twisted knee, and then trying to get back in, and the coach wouldn't let him in. And so the Celtics won the seventh game. And the finish, I'm 25 years old, and I'm kind of nervous about the whole thing. All this stuff has happened right in front of me, and my heart's beating fast. What am I going to write? What's the story about the balloons and this and that? And Wilt coming out of the game. And another guy at my paper said, wait till, he told me, he said, wait till Bill Russell's kind of by himself and ask him a question for me. Ask him if he's going to retire. And I said, well, why don't you ask him yourself? And he said, Bill Russell hates me. He won't talk to me. So I said, okay. So I'm getting all my notes, and I'm waiting for the moment for Bill Russell. And he goes through, takes a shower, and he gets dressed, and he's just about finished dressing. And it's just Bill Russell and Jim Brown, the actor. They're both standing over there. You know, I mean, there's these two civil rights activists, icon guys. And here I am, the 25-year-old little guy, coming over. And so I said, Bill, is there any chance you're going to retire? And Jim Brown, I always remember, he looked up at me, he said, retire? The man just won the world championship. Why would he ever retire? And so that was the finish of the whole thing. And of course, he retired about 6 or 7 weeks later. He sold the story to Sports Illustrated for $10,000. He was in the process of breaking up with his wife and family, and he left them and went to Los Angeles after the playoffs were over, and lived in Los Angeles for a while, and he was gone. He never lived in Boston again after that series. You know, he fought against having his jersey retired and the whole thing. They said, come on, you have to do it. And he did it without the public acclaim. And he coached a couple times, but after that, he kind of disappeared for a long period of time. It's only been in the last 10 years, I'd say, that he started being around. L.E. kind of always stayed, even sick as he was, stayed in full public view, and was kind of coming out at this thing and that thing. And Russell moved out to Seattle and wasn't a hermit, but just wasn't out in the social world a lot.
It was a terrible thing that he wasn't appreciated more by the city and by fans. Tommy Heinsohn had a tremendous quote. All I know is that Russell won the Olympic gold. He came here and won 11 championships for the Celtics, and then they named a freaking tunnel for Ted Williams. And by that he meant there was a tunnel named the Ted Williams Tunnel that goes under the city to the airport. And Ted Williams, as great as he was, the Red Sox never won anything while he was playing. And the city had the relationship with someone like Ted Williams, who was white. Didn't have it with Bill Russell, who was black.
Parfois moqué, souvent incompris, Bill Russell a dû attendre le crépuscule de sa vie pour recevoir les éloges qu'il méritait tant. Malgré l'argent, malgré les trophées, malgré les paillettes, Russell n'avait jamais vu le basketball comme une fin en soi, mais comme un outil pour impacter la société. Des souvenirs et des secrets, la légende des Celtics devait en compter de nombreux dans son génial esprit. De son enfance en Louisiane jusqu'à son décès survenu à 88 ans, Bill Russell n'avait pas connu une existence facile. Lui qui voulait utiliser le basketball comme un moteur pour influencer le monde, aura réussi sa quête. Alors Bill, si de là-haut tu nous écoutes, merci pour tout.
You don't win 11 out of 13 without being great. And he was great. So I would like to see more respect put on Bill Russell, because to dismiss that as nothing is not fair to him. Not fair to anybody from back in that era. And at the same time, he was a great American, Bill Russell was. All the work he did in civil rights, would hope people would remember that. He was more than just a basketball player. He was a great person, a hero. And I would like to see people remember that.